Celebrity autobiographies, are they good or are they bad? Well, I'm going to be looking at 3 today and letting you know what I think. I'm Beth and this is Reviews by Beth, and I'm going to be looking at Believe by Leigh-Anne Pinnock. I'm going to be looking at Spare by Prince Harry himself, and I'm also going to be looking at I'm Glad My Mum Died by Jeanette McCurdy. Before I start this, I'm just going to preface by saying that I listen to all of these on Audible, and I love doing that with celebrity autobiographies because I feel like I really connect to them. Often on Audible, it's actually them who is saying and speaking and narrating the book. So I feel like I get more of an insight into their actual words instead of just reading it on the page. Now, Spare by Prince Harry was definitely a book to remember, maybe for all the wrong reasons. I listened to this book on Audible like all the others, and it was very enlightening, especially into his life. This was at the time the Oprah interview was coming out, and we were hearing about all of the different things that were coming out in the media, the feud with William and Kate, and it was, are you team Kate or are you team Meghan? So like William versus Harry. And I did think it was very interesting and almost blasphemous to release this book at the time. But what I thought of the book itself, I thought it wasn't very well written. It was obvious that he didn't write it. The chapters were extremely small, and I just think that he sounded really pretentious. And he didn't come across well at all. I think he tried to just seem quite down to earth when really he just kind of seemed like a pompous prince who didn't really realize all of the privilege that he had. And I just think it was really damning on his kind of record. I thought it was interesting to learn about his childhood mostly. I think learning about how he grew up and the relationship that he had with William. He said that it wasn't that close when they were at school and that they were quite distant. It's quite weird to read because we were always told in the media that they were such a close, tight-knit family. Obviously, families aren't always perfect. There were just some bits in the book that just could have been left out. We did not need to know about the explicit nature and his sexual nature. I just did not need to know that. He did not need to release that information. I think when he fell out with William, it was just not written very well. I didn't feel a lot of sympathy for him. It's obviously very clear that he is very, very affected by the death of Diana, his mother, and that has carried through the main theme of the book. It's extremely sad to see that that was basically what twisted his character, and I think predominantly that's where all of this has come from. I think the heart of all of his problems nowadays. It was just a very strange insight into a prince's life, and I enjoyed that in a way because you never get an insight into a real prince's life. So having that as an autobiography at one point, it's like really interesting. This is what I like about celebrity autobiographies, is that you really get an insight into their life. But at the same time, I just could have done with like half the book. I thought it was way too long, and I just thought it was a bit pompous, and he didn't come across as well as I think he thought he would. So that is my opinion on Spare, and I would give it maybe a 2 out of 5. Now, not all autobiographies are completely awful. I actually really enjoy Leigh-Anne Pinnock's Believe, and if you don't know who Leigh-Anne Pinnock is, she is a member of Little Mix, the girl group, and they are a very successful band. They're one of the most successful girl bands in history. They were together for over 10 years and they won X Factor. I love Little Mix as well, I'm a huge fan. So seeing that story of the rise to fame, they were only girls at the time, they were about 17 when they rose to fame and won X Factor. And it was very interesting to see the life of a pop star. I think that's something that is often glamorized, and I often think it's glamorized, but people know that it's not always as glamorous as it seems. Now, Leigh-Anne Pinnock in Little Mix is the only black member, and she speaks about how being the only black member or mixed race member has really affected her, and she feels like she was often treated differently within the group. And it's very interesting to see how that racial element comes across through that girl group in Little Mix, but also pop itself. And there was one bit in the book that really stuck out to me, and it was about the difference in Brazil. So the girls would tour the world in their band, and often they can hear people shouting out the crowd, Jade, Leigh-Anne, Perry, those are the names of the girls in Little Mix. but she said that she always felt like her name wasn't shouted out as much, especially in the UK. But then when she went to Brazil and they did a huge show in Brazil, then literally her name was all that she could hear and she was getting so much more support. And then she wondered if there was a racial aspect, and that was kind of the light bulb moment into her thinking, gosh, is there a racial aspect to all of this? So that was really interesting for her to be so candid and so open and talk about her experience. And there's someone who is obviously not of colour, who is white. It's very, eye-opening, and I always try and say that we should read as much as we can about other people's experiences, because we shouldn't just be clouded on our own judgment. We should learn as much as we can about the people who surround us. I think we should all be aware of our own biases and our own privileges. So putting yourself in someone else's shoes or learning about other cultures is really important. And I think that this autobiography was so good for that and so enlightening. And I think she's really managed to touch quite a few people. Fun. She really managed to, touch quite a few people with her autobiography, and I thought it was written extremely well. And I listened to her again on Audible, and I just thought the way that she spoke was with such grace and elegance, and I think she did a really good job of that autobiography. So I would give it a 4 out of 5. If you're liking this video, please like, comment and subscribe. And if you want to support the channel, then you can click on our Amazon links, which will take you straight to the books, and that helps support us. Jeanette McCurdy's I'm Glad My Mother Died was a title that gripped me right from the beginning, and I had seen quite a few other creators read this and talk about how good it was. And I couldn't get my hands on the book, but I listened to it on Audible, and oh my goodness, I was literally gripped. Now, if you don't know who Jeanette McCurdy is, you probably recognise her. If you're from my generation, she was in iCarly and she was in Sam and Cat. So she was a Disney Channel star and she was a child star of Hollywood. And it really enlightens us on how child fame is handled, especially in Hollywood. And I just felt completely sorry for Jeanette. So basically, her story is quite a tragic one. She grew up in not the best financial situations. Her mum, unfortunately, had a lot of health issues and she wasn't in the most stable of families. So her parents said that we should go and get you into Hollywood and we should get you into TV and film. So she would do loads of auditions, and then she started getting some things, some commercials, and then some more bigger things, and then she rose to fame, especially when she got that Disney Channel contract. And it was just so interesting to see the relationship with her mother. Obviously the title is I'm Glad My Mother Died, and you're like, oh my goodness, who would ever write such a thing? But you can totally understand it by the end. And her life is so traumatic and it's so awful, and the things that she went through were terrible. So her mother basically forced an eating disorder on her at the age of 10. She was limiting her to 1,000 calories a day, and she was telling her, you've got to be skinny, you've got to be on a diet. So she basically just dieted her. So Jeanette just had this terrible, terrible, terrible relationship with food, which is awful, which carries through all the way to her adult life. She has to please her mother, so her mother is such an emotional abuser and really just emotionally blackmails and abuses Jeanette into doing all these roles for her. And then as she grows older, she develops bulimia and she just really has a hard time, especially when she was at Disney Channel. She didn't have the most stable relationship with the producer. He was known for being very abusive as well. So she was just surrounded by so many toxic people, especially in the Hollywood area. They didn't really take any care of children, which was so unexpected to hear. I mean, you hear about these child stars, but to really feel it was something else. And I just think it was written so well. The chapters were really small, and I was literally just worried about her, and I just wanted to get her through this. And the beginning of the autobiography, it starts with her as a child, and she reads it as like she was a child, and she reads it like going in childlike tendencies. And then as the book goes on, her voice becomes more mature, and even just listening to that was just so interesting and such a good dynamic that I've not seen before in an autobiography. And I just thought that was really, really clever. And this was definitely my most favourite autobiography. When I recommend it to someone, I'm like, you should read I'm Glad My Mum Died. Everyone's like, what? But honestly, it is one of my favourite autobiographies, and I just think listening to it on Audible made it 10 times better, in my opinion, because I love hearing people tell their own stories. So if I was to rate this autobiography, or if I was to rate Jeanette McCurdy's I'm Glad My Mum Died, I would give it a 5 out of 5 because I think it was incredible. So there's a bit of a mixed bag surrounding celebrity autobiographies, but I actually really enjoy them and I am looking forward to reading some more. And that is the end of the video. As always, please like, comment, and subscribe. And we have our Patreon channel if you want to support us. Bye!